Hi, everybody. Hi. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Like she said, my name is Courtney Harge. So I'm a theater producer, director, but also arts administrator with an emphasis on institutional fundraising, crowdfunding, and fiscal sponsorship. That's what I do at Fractured Atlas. Yay. So I am really excited to be on this panel. I really think it's such a great opportunity to get to hear from people who offer fellowships and what is needed. So I am, without further ado, going to allow these wonderful ladies next to me to introduce themselves. So first we have Diana Kemppainen.
Hi, I'm Diana Kemppainen. I'm the program manager at the Princess Grace Foundation. The Princess Grace Foundation offers support to emerging artists in dance, theater, and film. In theater, we offer support in the form of scholarships, apprenticeships, or fellowships to artists either at a university or working with a theater company. Because this is a panel about fellowships, I'm going to focus mostly today on apprenticeships and fellowships that we give in partnership with theater organizations that artists may be working at. I've been at the foundation for 7 years and been working as the program manager for 5 years, and really am the conduit between the artists and the programs. Once you become a Princess Grace Awards winner, you are a member of our community and family, and there are other opportunities for you to come back for individual support.
Thank you so much, Diana. Next we have Emilya Cachaparo.
Hi there. I'm the Director of Artistic and International Programs at Theater Communications Group, which is a service organization for the National Not-for-Profit Theater, based here in New York, but we do programs all across the country as well as internationally. In particular, a lot of people sometimes have not heard of Theater Communications Group or don't always connect it with American Theater Magazine, which we publish, or a lot of our books and scripts, which you see on Amazon, on whatever. But we are the largest not-for-profit publisher of dramatic books and scripts. In our grant making, our giving, we annually give approximately $2 million a year in a variety of disciplines to individual artists as well as theater organizations. But again, I'll focus specifically on our Fox Fellowship program and maybe a couple of the other programs that are appropriate and applicable for individuals. I do want to give a shout out to Jessica Lewis, who's sitting back there. And Jess is the point person for the Fox Fellowship program. So she's really the frontline person on a lot of this. I've been working at TCG for 100 million years, I was saying, for a very long, long time. But before that, I was in San Francisco at American Conservatory Theater, where I trained, but eventually ran their professional training program, or all of their training programs, for about 9 seasons or so. Just maybe out of curiosity, could I just do a quick poll with these guys?
Certainly.
If you raise your hand? I know that this is a SAG event, but I'm just curious, how many of you are also equity members? Yes, of course. Thank you. And how many of you, in addition to work as an actor, consider yourself a director? Or a generative artist, creator, playwright? Teaching artist? Yeah, okay, great. And then how many of you have been working professionally for 15 years or more? Okay. For 10 years or more? 5 years or less? Okay, great. Thank you so much. That really helps me.
And just for people who are watching this later in perpetuity, that was just all of those answers were a significant amount of the audience. Like everybody does everything, which is it's an amazing representation. One of the things I like to say in talking to the artists I work with is that you really do more than you think you do. And it's often not until somebody asks us a direct question that says, so what do you do? And you start listing stuff and you realize 20 minutes later you're still saying things that you do, that you really want to start paying attention to that. All of that has value, and all of that is worth communicating to funders, to your audience, and particularly when you start looking at fellowships, like you are highlighting different pieces of it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're only doing one thing, even if the fellowship is only for that moment or that concept. Like, it's all valuable.
And just actually to jump in, I think it is the world that we live in, right. Where, I don't know if any of you knows KJ Sanchez, who is a director, artist, actor, and she had said, well, you know, I think so many people now are slashers. And I said, slashers? And she said, well, actors slash directors slash choreographers slash teaching artists. And it's just the world that we live in now.
For sure. So we're going to jump right in. We have your questions. I've got a few questions of my own. And in getting to review the few I've got up here, there is definitely a theme. So we're just going to open it with the kind of simple question is, what is the best way to approach an organization that you don't have a relationship with? Is it even a feasible way to start? So you're just in your room making your work. How do you get out there and connect with someone?
I mean, that is a really tricky one, but I think maybe it's connected to what you said a second ago, that you know more than you think you know, and you know more people than you think you know. When you think about the circle of folks that maybe you haven't worked with on a production necessarily, but that you've been introduced to and you spent time with, or that you taught at a place where they are working. So there's some kind of in the Venn diagram of things that you got to find that sweet spot where you meet that organization. But I will be honest and say that building a relationship with an organization is an investment of time. It is not going to happen over a day or a week or a month or a year. It is a continuing relationship, and I think to not think of the organization as just the word organization, because organizations are composed of individuals. So you may not know the artistic director of the company, and maybe you know the literary manager. Well, that's the start of a relationship with that organization.
I would like to add, I sometimes just go places that the organizations are, which sometimes seems silly. But if people who have the Princess Grace are hosting an event, are doing an exhibition, are showing their play, are doing any of that, go see that. Sometimes just being in the space, you see people in the audience who you can connect with. You can read the back of programs. Like, that's one of the things I like to do, is if you're at an exhibition, if you're at a show, if you're at a theater performance, see who's funded it, see who's on the back, see if there are names that repeat, and then see what they're doing. I mean, one of the joys of New York City is that somebody around here is doing something, right? So go do that and see what's happening, and talk to people. And there's definitely a way to have the conversation that is just having a conversation. I'm interested in what you're doing. I saw that you were awarded this. I'm just interested in the process.
And I'm just going to, for us specifically, the Princess Grace Foundation, it's a nomination by a theater company to apply for the grant. So that relationship between you as an artist and the theater company is really important to us. You know, what are you going to get to do during your time there? What's the relationship like? How are they helping develop you as an artist? So the panel very much looks at the relationship that you're building with the company.
And with that, a kind of supplemental question is like, how realistic is it to develop this type of relationship? Because I think a lot of people, I hear from artists who are kind of scared, who are like, I don't know the right people, or I'm not in the right circles, and so feel that like building that type of relationship is unrealistic. So what would you say to an artist thinking that way?
Well, again, I think it goes back to your circles. Steppenwolf started because it was a bunch of people who went to school together and stayed in touch with each other and created this company. So again, look to see who are in the circles. If you're taking an acting workshop, who is in that circle? If you know a number of instructors, who is in that circle? I think it's very realistic. What's not realistic, again, is that it's going to happen overnight.
I was going to say, it takes time to build those relationships and really working at them. I mean, like any relationship, it takes time to develop and to work at that and to be reaching out to them.
And I think, part of that also is that you have to spend a great deal of time doing inner work, and I know actors do inner work, but that reflective work. We're not necessarily a reflective society where maybe a lot of you have, but most people have not sat around and thought, okay, well, what are my core values? What am I going to go to the mat for? What is my mission statement? What is the aesthetic that I'm drawn to? You know, who do I want to be in my world? And what do I give back? Because it's a reciprocal relationship in any relationship within organizations. It's as much what you're looking for as what you're bringing to the table.
Very good. That is very insightful. To really focus on the fact that it is a relationship. It's not a transaction. A lot of times people think that grants or fellowships are transactions. I give you application, you give me dollars, right? That's how it can work. And it's not. Your proposal in a lot of these things is saying, this is what I value, this is how what I value matches what you value, and this is how I think we can grow it together, which I think can be very helpful.
I mean, I think absolutely it's really developing your inquisitive side. A lot of times we'll have grant recipients and we'll set up letters of introduction to artistic directors or people in the theater field or not theater field, the design field, wherever, that they don't know. And I'll often say, well, the last thing that you want to be thinking about is going into that office and thinking about how you're going to ask them for a job, because that conversation is not going to go anywhere. It is better to try to really develop your level of inquiry and to try to find out, well, what is it that they're doing? Or how did they build that organization? People love to talk about themselves. Here we are.
True.
But, you know, people love to talk about how they got to where they are. So if you can open the door in that way and then find some kind of commonality that you can then build and develop, that is gold.
So I think that's a great segue to, how do you identify if a fellowship is right for you? Like, how do you identify if the relationship is one that you want for them?
I mean, I think you really have to look at the guidelines of the fellowship and think, do I fit into this? Am I trying to, one of my favorite things is, am I trying to fit a square peg into a round hole? Or do I really, really fit all of these things that they are looking for? So really looking at the guidelines and making sure that you are applicable to that situation and that you have a good relationship, for us, with the nominating organization or with the organization that you're applying with. And not just, it's not just a transactional thing. It's, this is the perfect fit for me, because that's going to come across in your written work and in your materials, that it's just the perfect fit.
And take advantage. Most funding organizations have info sessions or provide technical assistance or have office hours where staff can be contacted and you can ask your questions. I don't know about other folks, but we will not read your proposal before you submit it and give you feedback. We just don't do that, and we don't have the capacity to do that. But we can certainly give you information as to whether or not you're on the right track and maybe at the right point in your career to do it.
That leads into the next question. What is the right point? You know, when we're talking about relationships, these relationships taking time and knowing it's the right fit. So how do you know that? Is there some type of kind of objective way to understand that?
Well, I mean, for us, we are funding emerging artists, so we ask that, you know, and now emerging is a variety of different levels of where you are. You can be just starting out in your career, you can have been working for a number of years, and it goes back to, for us, the relationship that you have between the theater organization that would be nominating you and yourself as an artist. What opportunities are they providing you? Is this a really exciting opportunity that you're going to get to do with this company? And then that might be the right time to apply specifically for our award.
With our Fox program, and I think there's some handouts and stuff, one sheet's back there, yeah. There are two categories. One is distinguished achievement for those folks that have been working in the field a substantial amount of time, substantial body of work. And, you know, one way to kind of look at whether you fit in what category is to look at the previous recipients, you know, and not to say that that's only who we're going to support or that kind of person is who we're going to support, but it will give you a sense of, okay, they've been working in the field doing la 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 la, and so that's that level. So to really think that through, the other part of the Fox Fellowship is for early to mid-career. And I know that's a tough kind of I don't know, determination in that way. We do have guidelines that kind of spell out how long out of a training program, if you were in a professional training program, to kind of give a sense of whether you're in that extraordinary potential side or whether you're in that distinguished achievement side. We've actually been, just this morning actually, we've just been going through conversations because we really look at all of our programs as kind of living, morphing things that we tweak and they change. They're never the same from round to round. So even if you applied one year, don't necessarily assume it's going to be the exact same set of questions the next time around or the exact same panel, because it's not going to be. We were just talking about how to best serve the folks that are very early in their career, because the folks that tend to be more successful in their applications for us in that extraordinary potential category are the ones who are not just out of grad school or a training program, ones who have had, say, what, like 10 years experience? Yeah, professional experience under your belt. And we're looking specifically for theater experience. It's great if you've got, for that particular program, it's great if you've got film experience, worked in opera, worked as a choreographer, all of the writer, those things are great. But the Fox Fellowship program is specifically for actors who want to make a focus in the not-for-profit theater, not the commercial theater, but the not-for-profit.
I want to add, just like kind of as a bit of housekeeping, is that to go back to the two things that you said earlier. One is these relationships take time, and two, having kind of core values. It's something you don't necessarily think about, because I like to look at grant applications and fellowship applications almost as like checklists. And if I can't answer a question, one, that shows I'm not ready, but it also shows where I need to work to get ready, right? And it also shows that if my work doesn't align with that question, if it's not in my core values, then this just isn't the right fit for me. So if I have to just like move and manipulate the things I'm doing to like fit into this box, or try to put the square peg in the round hole, it's just not the right space for me. And it could be my work is growing to that space, or it could just be that like that's just not where my work is going to be, and that's okay. Because one thing, as somebody who's read a bunch of grant applications, as you guys have all done, we can tell when somebody is answering a question from a place that isn't genuine, for lack of a better word, where they're kind of stretching or manipulating or moving their work to try to answer the question correctly. Because that is the trick of the questions. There is, in fact, not a right answer. You have all the information. If you don't have enough information to properly answer that moment, then it's just not the right moment for you.
And I would also say that with all of our grant programs, if you're not accepted when you apply, don't give up.
Right.
If you truly feel that this is right for you, then come back. We've had lots of grant recipients that have tried like 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and it is the readiness factor. But part of that also is that in a good majority of the cases, depending on where you are in the selection process, we will give you, as technical assistants, provide you with panel comments so that you're able to see, well, oh, okay, the panel had really a lot of questions about this particular part of my application, or I didn't really think that through because they didn't get it. It didn't land. So you'll hopefully get that feedback and improve your application.
And I just want to echo that we are the same way. And I think most foundations operate the same way. If you didn't receive it in one year, that doesn't mean that you wouldn't receive it in another year. So it's worth calling an organization and asking for feedback on your application. We're more than happy to provide feedback, and it might help you craft an application in the next year. The other thing is that, and I'm sure this is true for you guys, our panels change yearly, so sometimes the makeup of the panel, they're living people too, and they are bringing their own personal experiences into it, so a different makeup of a panel, they might read your application in a different way as well. So it's always worth it to come back if you still feel you fit the application criteria.
Yeah, I think we're similar that way. Not that we use a peer panel review process, which means that you will be reviewed by peers in the field. So they will be directors or other actors or those running training programs or a casting director, those kinds of folks. There are some funders and other organizations that are doing staff review. So I think that's actually a good question to ask is, what is the selection process? Just to give you a sense of how that might play out. And it's different for us from year to year and from program to program.
Yeah. That is an excellent segue into...
Ooh, can I just thought of something.
No problem.
The other thing, too, that makes me a little crazy, I have to say, is, reading an application and it's like this jargon, this grantsmanship jargon that doesn't give me your passion. It doesn't say who you are. It's not in your language, your voice. And after reading, so many of these, it's really difficult on the selection process, the panelists to read through things that are not conveying anything about who you are. So don't dilute your voice. I think it's really great to have feedback. That whether it's somebody who's got development or fundraising experience or a teacher or a colleague or somebody that you trust who can give you an objective view of what you're proposing, because a lot of times people will not connect the dots. That you're living in your head, you've got it all sorted out, it all makes sense to you in your head, but it's not coming out in the language. So by having somebody else take a look and giving you that honest feedback can be very helpful.
I agree. I like to, as an actor like you all are, one of the things I like to do is read my proposal in the voice of someone who I know doesn't like me. And I offer that because our inner voices are really fond of us, right? They tend to be very kind and they tend to be very sweet about us. Or they can be hypercritical in a way that's there. But one of the things I like is by thinking about somebody who doesn't like me, somebody who's going to ask questions that I don't want them to ask, or who's going to kind of tear it apart in a way that I know I don't want, it helps me just to see where the holes are. Because, again, generally when we're telling our story, we know exactly what we mean, right? We get us, hopefully, right? But there's always somebody out there who doesn't, and it can be helpful to just, if it's like I said, with an active imagination, like put it in the frame of somebody who is not necessarily rooting for you, because panels are terrible places, and I mean that I don't mean that. What I mean by that is generally they're in conference rooms, they're underlit, they last forever. You're reading 200 applications in a day. Sometimes they can be hard, and so and everybody wants to think that they're the application that's going to be read like fresh at 9 a.m. with the coffee and like the bright-eyed bushy-tail thing. But generally, you're the person who's read at like 3 p.m. where you're 3 hours out of lunch. You still got 2 hours to go, and you're just trying to like make it through. And knowing that, you can't hide what you're doing 3 paragraphs in, right? That's it. You can't do that. And so I tend to plan for, like, what is the least optimal condition, and how can I make sure that my proposal and my story still holds up in that space? If somebody only had 10 minutes to read it, like, would they know exactly what genre I'm working with? Do they know who my partners are? Do they know when this is going to happen? And do they know why I think it's important? And if I can make sure that is there, then I feel like I have done my job.
Kind of connected to that, if you can at all be on a selection panel of any kind, yes. Not necessarily a grant program, it could be for a college board or a school or whatever, but that will give you an insight to what it feels like to be on the other side of the table. Because folks that we bring on to panels say that to us all the time, that it's an incredible bit of professional development.
Yeah.
You read these applications, you see what works, what doesn't, when people have read the guidelines, are answering the question. You just get a sense of how the dynamics happen in the room, in the selection process. It's incredibly valuable.
Totally agree. So that leads us to, what should I include in my application? So I've got it. I've got my relationship. You know, I've worked with the funder. I've ideally read the guidelines. Specifically, the question is, what should be included in a personal statement, and what are some best practices? So, what should I say once I am writing my application with the funder I now have a relationship with?
Well, I think for us, we have a page limit, so you have to be brief, and you have to put a lot of stuff in there. So it is a challenge, and I think most funders have limits in terms of how long you can speak about it. So you want to make sure that you are getting your voice across, who you are as an artist, where you are now as an artist, and where you hope to be as an artist. But you still want to hit those checkpoints of, what am I going to be doing during the time frame that I'm applying for this grant for? What are my goals during this grant period? For us, you also have a letter of recommendation from the person who's nominating you. So they have a chance to also expand on you as an artist, and the goals that you'll be achieving and the work that you'll be doing during your time. But you really want to give us a very clear picture of what that grant period is going to look like, what specific roles and responsibilities you're going to take on within your grant period, as well as coming across as you as an artist and bringing a bit of your personal self out in your statement. So it's a challenge.
We have specific questions, so answer the questions. But in the application also, it's divided. So there is a section that the actor completes, a section that the host theater completes, and whether that's the artistic director or whoever your main contact liaison person is there. And then there's a joint statement. One of the things that I love to do, and I tell our panelists to do, is read the intent, the goal of the actor, and lay that against what the host theater is saying, because sometimes if they are not saying the same thing, it leads me to think they haven't talked, and so they haven't had a deep conversation about mutual goals and expectations, or even timeline. So make sure that your stories are straight, and make sure that you have a level of conversation where you're talking about all of the details, and not leaving anything for assumptions, because ours is working with a host theater, and you have to be in residence on site for X amount of time, and then the rest of the time is your professional development. You need to also lay out kind of a timeline and a curriculum that you're planning for, and to really make the case for, if you want to work with Roy Hart, then why Roy Hart is the person for you versus Cecily Barry or whoever. You know, so a level of specificity is really important.
Another great question to go behind that is, what are some questions one should ask oneself?
I think what are your goals in the relationship with the organization, and what are you hoping to get out of your relationship with the organization? Because that's going to help determine the activities that you're going to do with the organization and how you approach them. And then also, I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, asking who you are as an artist and really doing that personal work on yourself to make sure that you know who you are and the work that you do as an artist, because that's going to come across in your personal statement and the relationship that you have with the organization that's nominating you.
Yeah, I guess with our Fox program in particular, we're looking at the actor as the nexus in that relationship between the theater and its community that it's serving, its audience. So a thing to think about is why this theater in this community? What am I bringing to them? How do I hope to engage with them? How are they going to feed my work? How am I going to feed and give back to that larger community? So what's that reciprocalness? And also, frankly, to think about, well, what will happen if you don't get this? You know, what is your plan B? A lot of times people say, well, I'm going to do this anyway. You know, I'm getting these things in place because this application is actually helping me think through the details of what I want to do. Regardless of whether I get this thing or not, that's my passion piece. And then when you know that's your passion piece, that comes through in your narrative. You know, does that make sense?
On a previous panel here, actually at the Screen Actors Guild Foundation, I was on with Ben Cameron. He said something that he said a lot of times, but I heard, and he said, a value is something you do even though you are punished for doing it. And that's what something you value is that. And if you are writing, particularly for fellowships, that are about your kind of personal work, you know, they're about you doing the work you want, and you say, well, if I don't get funded, then this just isn't going to happen. It can occasionally sound like that's not the thing you're passionate about in that moment. I'm not going to make that a blanket statement because sometimes you're just like, I can't do this without your funding. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of times, like Emilya was saying, that somebody's like, I need your help, but I'm going to do this. This is going to happen. But I feel like this is an opportunity for your organization to help me do this. Because you actually do, as an applicant, have a bit more power than you think you do. The relationship ideally should be that of equals. They have the money, but you have the vision, you have the project. And when you are writing your application, that should come across. That you are offering them the opportunity to support this amazing thing you're about to do. And that can help you, I think, more actively engage in the grant or fellowship process. So with that, now that you're excited about your project and you're writing all these things, how do you select references? How do you select other people to talk about your work with you or for you?
Like you were going to say something.
I mean, for us, we ask for a letter of recommendation from the theater company that you're working with. Generally, it comes from the artistic director, but it could also, if we give grants to directors, designers, and actors. So if there's somebody more specific, like let's say you're a designer, and there's the head costume person or something, the letter of recommendation should come from them, or could come from them. But it should be from somebody who can really speak to your work as an artist, and also has a level of excitement about what you are bringing to the table and how you're going to work with their organization and help their organization grow. So it's that symbiotic relationship that I think you touched upon a little bit earlier. We don't really look at additional letters of recommendation, so it's really important that the person who is nominating you, the artistic director, or the person at the company who's writing the letter of recommendation, really has a good, strong relationship with you and knows exactly who you are as an artist, because that letter is given weight at the panel process.
Yeah, I think in general, I'm going to assume that you're not going to submit a letter of recommendation that is negative. We're going to assume that you're going to submit a letter of recommendation that is going to be in full support of you. So that said, it should be, somebody who knows your work and can talk about it with a level of specificity. And that specificity, like underscore. We can always tell, and I know there are some folks in the field that are hit up a lot for letters of recommendation, and just a lot of times we'll see on the panel side, we'll see letters of recommendation. We don't actually limit how many letters a recommender writes. I know some folks do that. But sometimes we'll have a string and we'll go, oh God, she was really excited about this one. Oh no, she wasn't so excited about this one. I mean, in talking to the person that's recommending you, ask them frankly if they are supporting somebody else for this particular grant. And do they champion you? That out front, because if they're writing 5, are you number 1 or are you number 5, right?
Ask the hard questions. That's what I got from that. Like, you want to have a strong relationship with whoever's writing for you, because the people at fellowship organizations will check, right? And so you want to make sure that you know what that letter is going to look like, right? And it's not, you're not checking their letter or whatever, but you want to know that the relationship is strong enough that you can have a reasonable sense of how that letter is going to reflect on you and on your work. And it is, to go back to the earliest point about building relationships, like, see if they have a relationship with the funding organization. It is helpful, particularly if they don't limit how many letters you should have. I probably never more than like 3, or depending, or however many the limit is. But if they don't, like, that's not an invitation to send 20. But it's important to be strategic. So if there's somebody who knows you really, really well and can really talk on behalf of your work, submit that one. But if there's also somebody who knows you mostly well, maybe not as well as the first person, but does have a relationship to the organization, let that be your second letter, right? It should be about you, but if somebody can connect the dots very clearly between you and the space you're applying to, look for that too.
And also, how does the person who's writing your letter connect to your resume?
Right.
So is that somebody who hired you? Is that somebody you worked with? Is it an organization that they run that you worked at? Or is it someone who is not connected to you at all? If I'm looking at your resume, then I'm going to start thinking, well, did they connect the dots for me in that letter? Or how are these people connected? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, make that explicit. Yeah, like, I know this person from this time we spent together, and if it's particularly if it's missing, like all of your materials. I think it's a good point to say. All of your materials create kind of complete proposal package. So it's important to know that in talking about what to include, like, you don't want to. I was like to say, you don't want to have a budget that doesn't account for the things that you've wrote about in your narrative. And you don't want to have a letter of recommendation from somebody who your resume says you've never worked with, right? And it's possible you edit, people make changes, but you want to make sure that, like, this complete story kind of connects in a way that somebody who doesn't know you, who's only getting this snapshot, can make reasonable assumptions. Because if panelists guess, I promise they almost always guess wrong, right? If there's a bit of information, it's like, oh, well, I assume that they will figure out that this person and I went to college and, like, worked on this project and built this thing together, and they won't find that. There's just not enough time. That's not a lack of skill. There's, like, not enough time in the room to play detective and connect dots. It's just like, this isn't clear to me. Next.
Well, specifically on our panels, and I should also be clear that staff, at least in our case, we're in a panel meeting, and I'm very opinionated, and one of the hardest parts of my job is to sit there and not give an opinion, not engage in the conversation. It's the panel that is making this decision.
Right.
But I will specifically, but I'll jump in to guide the panel, keep them on point in terms of criteria and that kind of thing. But I will absolutely tell them you cannot assume. I'll call them on it and say, is that an assumption? Where is that in the page? Where is that in the resume? Where is that in the narrative that you're referring to? At least on our panels, we don't want them to make assumptions. We want them to be grounded in what's real on the page.
And I just want to piggyback. We don't sit on the panel either, so it's a panel of experts. But if they have to guess most of the time, if they don't know, if it's not clear, they just say, oh, well, we don't really know, so we're not gonna make an assumption. The relationship isn't clear, or the responsibilities and the activities that are going to take place during this time, they haven't given us that level of specificity, and this other applicant did. And So it's really, really important to really connect all those dots and to lay it out and to not assume that they're going to be able to make those connections in the panel process.
So if there is one critical part of an application, what would you say it is for your applications for your organizations?
Great question.
Trying to hold my own up here.
More than. It goes back to the goal. Like, why do you want this grant? You know, and making the case for why this is the right moment for you. It really is as simple as that, I think.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. It's what is the opportunity that you're being given with this partnership with the organization, and how do you make that clear in the application? For us, we also have a joint application, so it's you as the artist submitting components of the application, and it's also your nominating theater company submitting components of the application. So really making sure that both you and the nominating organization are really driving home the point of this relationship during this grant period. Why now? Why this point? What is so exciting about this relationship and the opportunity provided?
Excellent.
And I actually should say that we consciously don't want reviews. We consciously don't want headshots until actually we get them from the recipients, but not during the selection process. We try to make it as even a playing field as we possibly can in that way, and for everybody to make their case for the exceptional quality of your work in the narrative. So the words, the writing, incredibly important.
With that, to talk more about what's kind of elements of the application. Do you require video for your applicants?
We do,
You do?
yes, and particularly for actors, we would like to see you act. But for the directors out there too, you know, for the designers, for the directors, and the actors, we do ask for work samples. We understand that for directors and designers, sometimes getting videos of your actual show could be really hard, especially given equity guidelines. But as much as possible, for actors, we recommend that you submit at least 3 work samples. They can be, you know, just filmed in studio. They don't have to be a performance piece. They can be 3 monologues, although over the years, I find that it's really helpful that you submit something with somebody else so that the panel can see how you play off of somebody else. So I would recommend, if possible, to do 2 monologues and then 1 scene where you are playing it off somebody else. It's very important for actors in our process to submit contrasting styles. That doesn't necessarily mean a Shakespeare and a contemporary. It means contrasting styles in the characters so that they can really see your full range of you as an artist.
Yeah, it's interesting because, with when we had our director, designer, and playwright programs, those were all work samples. With directors, it would be production stills, and designers, it would be models or fabric swatches or renderings. Playwrights, it would be writing samples. But with actors, we've had a lot of conversation just internally about the video question, and just because the quality can sometimes be so drastically uneven that there's no way, because our whole thing is to create an even playing field amongst all the applicants. It's very difficult, we feel, to create an even playing field where somebody has got a professional video they're submitting, and then somebody else has got something that they made, you know, in their bedroom, and the lighting and the whatever, and that does affect a panel's decision. All of those kinds of things. So I really suggest for those folks, for those funders that are requiring a video, that you spend a good amount of time editing, looking at it, having other people looking at it, to make sure that the quality is something that is going to stand up, because it's been the downfall. I love being on other funders' panels because I see how other people work, and just it makes me reflect on our process, and I bring back things and steal things from other folks. But one of the things, you know, is, sitting there and I can see a panel just turn in 2 seconds.
I think luckily we are at an age, you know, over the past couple of years, and I've seen the video quality really improve. And even what directors and designers can submit we have so much more access, even, you know, our iPhones are capable. It maybe is not the best video quality, but it's so much better. So I think over the past couple of years, that video quality and that issue has really improved. Our panel does, you're right, you know, sometimes if a video quality is poor, and this affects more of our dance category than I would say our theater category, actually, in terms of being able to see like their lines. But the panel does sometimes take into account, you know, well, especially if it's like a director and it's just a back of house, they probably couldn't get the best video quality. So they do keep in mind, sometimes we're limited technologically, and that doesn't mean that it wasn't an amazing performance. But I do think that over the past few years, it's very easy, especially for an actor, to film a monologue, you know, with a friend. Maybe they have a camera, or maybe it's just, you know, your computer or something, and then you can edit it quickly together.
With that, I have both a comment and a question. So one of my comments I like to talk to my artists about when preparing video samples is panelists are not audience, and so you have to sometimes be strategic in a different way. So like the powerful moment of like 30 seconds of silence in a theater, where this person has earned it, right? Like, you know, you've spent an hour and a half like earning this beautiful pensive moment that does not work as a work sample. It just doesn't, because you're viewing 3 to 5 to 15 minutes if somebody is super generous, and you can't earn that silence in the same way. So you have to be strategic and say, while this moment was like, it made the show when people were there, it's not a strategic work sample move.
Definitely. And I think, you know, we say you can submit up to 15 minutes, but we're not always they're not necessarily gonna watch all of that. They might fast forward through your work sample to get to a specific moment. They might watch the first minute or two, and then they've seen enough. So you really wanna make sure that you're putting what you think is the best work first in those first couple minutes of the work sample, because they're not necessarily gonna view the entire thing or those 30 seconds of silence.
Or, you know, make sure that you give them the time count or whatever, the counter thing, so they know where to go to on the video rather than scrolling through and sitting through. Because I've been on panels and sometimes people use like a 1, 2, or 3.
That's what we do.
Yeah. So basically it takes 3 people out of a panel to stop seeing it. So if I'm done and I say 1, somebody else says 2, 3, I mean, that can be in like 10 seconds, 1, 2, 3. Or it can be, if we're really engaged, did anybody say 1 yet? And it's like 10 minutes later. Hard to tell, but that's going to be. Yeah.
Also, I've seen people miss the first 2 minutes of a video thinking that there was supposed to be sound, and there wasn't. You know, it's one of those things that like you can't always control, but like where this thing is happening, where there's movement and it's supposed to be in silence, and some interesting stuff is happening. And so what in the panelists, what happens is they're like, this looks really cool. Is it on? And so then you start thinking the equipment is broken, and so you're not actually watching. And it's just one of those things that sometimes a simple trick actually is a little title card. If your first 5 seconds is the first 10 seconds are silent. Yeah. This name, piece, whatever, first 10 seconds are silent. If that's the moment that you have to use, let people know. Oh, okay, I know I don't have to like fidget. And some people, I understand there's a hesitance because it feels like you're like stepping away from the art, but that's why I want to say panelists are not audience. They're viewing the work in a different way. They will appreciate it like audience, but there's a task to be done, and so you want to make sure that you give them as many tools as possible to make that happen.
Absolutely. I would say for us, we actually, and this is not true, as you know, and as you know we pre-screen all of the work samples. So we actually do watch your work samples in advance and know that it's going to start in silence and know that the equipment's not broken. This is just how it is. And wait a second, you're gonna see it. That being said, it's really helpful. We give space to write a brief description of your work sample, and it's a really great opportunity to provide perhaps those technical cues, but also perhaps to give, you know, some context to what the audience is, or what the panel, I should say, is going to see in the work sample and how it relates to your work as an artist. And I would say really take that space anytime an organization asks you for more information. Give them that more information as much as possible, because it's really going to help round out your application.
So with that, along the same lines of video, this question is really great. What is the most important element of the video actor should submit? So I want to slightly rephrase the question to say, if I could only rent one piece of equipment, so I could rent a good mic, I could rent some lighting, or I could rent like a really great camera, what do you think would be the piece of equipment I should rent to do my work sample? I like to...
Sorry, it's lighting and sound. It's hard for me to like pull that out, because if the sound quality is really poor, you could look fabulous and I can't hear a word of what you're saying. If the lighting is poor, I can't see what you're doing. It's hard.
No, that's fair. I know it's a hard question, but...
Yeah, I think...
You agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think if I had to pick, I think sound would probably be more important, because even though it's poor lighting, I mean, this is not very nice lighting, but you could turn on your fluorescent lights and have somebody see you,
Right.
But you really want to make sure that they can hear the inflection in your voice, but you need to be seen. You can't be in the darkness.
Right. No, but I feel like, I mean, I would agree. I know it's like, it's impossible to, it's an impossible question, but it also is like, sound is also, I think, the hardest to capture, which is probably, if I had to pay for equipment, I would shoot an iPhone video with a boom mic. You know, I would like make that, I would make that choice, because it's the harder to transfer, and it's the hardest to go back and fix, frankly. But all of it, prioritize making your videos.
Find a filmmaker friend.
I was going to just say barter in some kind of way.
Or if you know, I mean, this is a great opportunity where if you know a bunch of people are applying for the same thing, like it's not necessarily a zero-sum game. Like we can submitting stronger applications together, even if it's for your project or whatever. Like submitting stronger applications actually strengthens the field, believe it or not. So if everybody's applying for this fellowship, you guys chip in, get a camera together, shoot all of your work samples as a group for your separate things, because it's not about you being better than someone else. It's about you setting your goals and communicating clearly what your goals are, and those goals aligning with the goals of the foundation or the organization. So everybody submitting high quality work samples doesn't mean that it decreases your chances of getting accepted. It actually just means everybody's submitting better applications, and organizations have the power to go to their funders and say, look at how awesome the field is. We might need to offer more fellowships. We might need to offer more work, because look at all the amazing people we just couldn't get to.
That actually happens relatively often in our program, that in our guidelines we'll say that there are, or maybe we don't even say it in our guidelines, but we'll say that the baseline number that we're giving grant-wise each round is, say, 4, a minimum of 1 in each category, and then 2 at large. But we've had 7 in the last couple of rounds, particularly because the pool was so strong. The panel felt that, you know, they were saying to staff, to me, you've got to go to the funder. We will not break the tie. We will not do that. We want all of these folks to be funded. So then I go to our funder and say, well, listen, the panel felt really strongly. What do you think? And then they'll say, okay, which they have. So again, it really is connected to that. All boats rise.
Yeah. We talked, this question was about, and clarity, just does it matter if it's Shakespeare or from stage or screen? And I actually would like to amend this to say, is a monologue this film monologue, is it an opportunity to show your original work? Or should you use previously published work for these auditions? Or does it matter?
It doesn't. I don't think it really matters. I think you want to put your best foot forward. I will say that, for us, it's a theater application to work at a theater company. So, you don't want to only show your work samples for you as a film actor. You do want to show that you can do stage work. And I think it can be, if you do a monologue that's known, well, the panelists are going to know it. So they'll have a frame of reference, which can be a double-edged sword, good or bad, because you can show them an exciting way to do it that maybe they haven't seen before, and then that's really a refreshing take on it, and that catapults you up. I think it's also important, if you want to show them your original work, again, it's a grant for acting, so they're not necessarily looking at, if you've written the work and devised the work, they're not necessarily looking at that, they're really looking at the acting. So whatever you feel is putting your best foot forward in that is what you should be submitting.
And I think really tailoring it to that particular program. I know sometimes just because of cost and whatever, it's easier to make kind of the one video that you're going to submit everywhere, but that one size fits all isn't necessarily going to always work for you.
Absolutely, and I think we've talked about the relationship between the nominating organization or the organization that you're partnering with for the grant is really important. So if you are saying that you're going to be doing this type of specific work during your grant period and that's what you're applying for, it's very helpful to provide a work sample that complements that work so they can really fully understand your capacity as an artist and how you'll be used in the grant period.
Good answers, ladies. You guys are awesome. Specifically for Diana, for Princess Grace, can an actor who has established his or her own production company self-nominate?
No.
There we go.
Self-nominations are not allowed. You have to be, again, we're looking at partnerships between an artist and a company. We're looking, a part of, you'll read the guidelines, and if you go to our website, you can see the specific guidelines, but one of the guidelines is that you must not have worked for the nominating organization for more than 5 years. And a part of that is because we want the relationship between you and the nominating organization to be new and exciting, and how is it helping you develop as an artist? So if it's your own theater company or an organization that you've worked with for a number of years, is it really providing you a new opportunity, or are you just looking for some funding? And then that goes back to, are you really fitting the guidelines of what we are asking for in the application? We do have a playwriting grant, which is separate, and that you don't have to be nominated, and you just submit a play. It's for a residency with new dramatists, for a year-long residency with them. But that's separate than our theater apprenticeships and fellowships, although I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about that one. But in our general, no self-nominations. And the panel will know, too, if you are the associate artistic director and you're really the co-artistic director of that company and you're just looking for a way to pay your salary line, it comes across in the application.
For either of you, is there a cap on number of applicants?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Alrighty. And we talked about this.
And just thinking, it made me think about caps. And there's no cap on age either. There's no maximum, as is there's no minimum age-wise.
Same here. Although I just want to clarify, though, that an organization can only submit one artist. Mm-hmm. So, well, I should further clarify, they can submit one apprenticeship and one fellowship. So while there's no cap on the number of applications that we will receive, the nominating organization can't submit 6 applications. They do have to pick one. And again, that goes back to the relationship between the organization and the artist being really important, and being able for the organization to really, really speak to your work as an artist and why is it so exciting to have you there, which you can't do if you're nominating 6 different people.
Yeah, Ditto, the same for us too. An organization can only submit one, and an organization that's submitting can't have an existing Fox Fellowship that's still in process. So that does take some out of the running.
I know we covered this before, but just to get kind of the explicit answer, do your organizations provide feedback or allow for direct follow-ups?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, fantastic. And can you give us a overview of your deadlines?
Sure. Our grants are given on an annual basis. The grant period is September 1st through August 31st, so following the school years is kind of how we think of it. The applications are generally due around March 31st for theater, for both theater and playwriting. And the applications generally go up online in January before the deadline. I just want to note that we have changed our application process over this past year, and we are completely online now, so all applications are submitted via our website, and we don't accept applications that are mailed in. pgfusa.org.
Yeah, similarly, actually, Jess has been working tirelessly to get the online application going. And so we are all online, not a mailed-in submission.
So exciting.
Oh. I mean, just on the staff end, it really, helps. Generally, our deadlines, it's not usually the exact same day, but it's usually late spring. This year was May 13th, right. And we try to get the guidelines up right after the new year or so, but just keep taking a look at our website to see how that might change. And as I mentioned actually at the top, we really are just even rethinking, this is our 10th year of this particular program, and so it seemed like a perfect opportunity to really evaluate the impact of what we've done, whether it's working for people, which I think it is, what could be changed in a substantial way, maybe what we can do to address the needs of early career actors, since they seem to be not as competitive as the ones that are maybe mid to a little older, or more further along, more veteran. So watch, because there are conceivably going to be changes.
Thank you for that. This is an interesting question. So we think of both of your organizations as being connected to larger, as a connector of larger organizations, right? Very present in the field. So is it more important in looking for a partner organization to choose one that is more financially solvent and powerful in reputation, or one that is more a match for you culturally or ideologically and struggling? So...
I'm going to pick that apart because financial stability, absolutely. The host organization has got to submit an audit of its most recently completed fiscal year and its 990, and I'll be looking through, this is something actually the panel does. Staff goes through all of the audits to make sure they're not qualified audits, to make sure that the organization is going to be an ongoing concern. We've had a couple of situations in our programs where the theaters have folded for a variety of reasons, and we are strongly committed to the recipient, so we will work to find another placement for that recipient. We will never leave them hanging in the wind that way. So financial stability, essential, but with the match, don't necessarily go for a Lord A if the kind of work you're doing is not Lord A work. You know, if the kind of work you want to do is ensemble-based, devised work, that's who you should be finding. Find the match for you, not the thing that you think the panel wants to see.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, we do look, we ask for audited financial statements. You have to have, the organization has to have been a 501c3 for at least 3 years. We're looking to make sure that they've retained that 501c3 status, that they are financially solvent. But, you know, we're not looking, is this an organization that's operating at a $2 million budget? You could be an organization, a very small theater organization that's operating at, you know, $100,000. And the fit, the match between you and the organization is right. So we are, you know, we want to make sure that when we're giving a grant, we're giving it to an organization that's going to be around to carry out the roles and responsibilities that they've said that they're going to do with this artist during the grant period. But we're also, and I mean, more importantly, we're looking at the relationship between the artist and the company, and is it one that makes sense? So don't just, as you said, don't just look for this is a big theater company, this is who I should be working with because that's going to make my grant successful. The relationship is really, really key and important.
This question is, do either of you have kind of an actual case that you can talk about of somebody who reached out to you or of a successful applicant where this relationship was built, they went through the application process, they were awarded, and if you don't have a specific example now, are there spaces on your website where you can talk, where somebody could find that information if they wanted to?
God, we've got a bunch. I'm looking at Jess.
You know, I think the most we have a bunch, and I think I'm not going to talk about one specifically. I think that one of the things that, you know, coming back and asking for feedback as an individual is really important. I think also as an organization, for organizations to come back and ask for specific feedback. So we've had times where artistic directors have come back and said, I've applied a couple of times with these artists. I think these artists are really great, and I haven't received the grant. What can I do? And then we go back and we look at the application and we help talk them through what would be crafting a successful application. And we've had that happen a number of times where providing that feedback after the application was not accepted the first time really helps them craft a better application, and for the organization helps them in the future to know what to look for when they're identifying their artists.
I mean, I will say that part of the mark, I think, of a successful grant is one where the relationship outlasts the term of the grant. Because part of the purpose of it, of our program, is to deepen the relationship between the artist, the actor, and that host organization. So if it's a one-of and it ends like the day after that grant is over, then we haven't done our job. In that way. But if it continues so that, I'll give an example in another program. It was our New Generations program, Future Leaders, which was developing leaders in the field, theater leaders, and we look at leadership in a variety of ways, not just artistic directors or managing directors, but wig masters, dramaturgs, directors of education. One of the recipients, Aaron Davidman, was being mentored by a traveling Jewish theater in San Francisco. And I think the relationship was going fabulously. It seemed like just great. In a variety of ways, their goals were being met, their activities, all of that. About midway through the grant period, I got a call from Aaron, and he had said, from Corey Fisher, who was, it was an ensemble company, and he had said, well, we're really changing the structure of our company, and we're looking for a new artistic director, and we found one. And I said, well, great. And he said, yeah, well, it's Aaron, and who was the mentee, who was being mentored, who was a grant recipient by Corey. And I said, well, that's actually the best of all possible worlds, because you have deepened your relationship. You want him to lead your company. Yes, of course. So we made adjustments. That is one thing I will say. We try to be as flexible as we possibly can. On the other end, like let's say if you are one of our recipients and there's a date change, or like I said, with a couple of people, the theater closed or the leadership changed, or in this case where Aaron then became the leader of that organization, then we were flexible to say, well, okay, we'll work with you. How can we use the rest of the grant so it's actually a learning opportunity for him to transition into being artistic director and for you to deal with succession in the organization. So funders can be flexible, too, in that way, but that, I think, is a mark of success.
We've talked a lot about about the fellowship process and all of that. And are there opportunities available if you're not part of a nonprofit or not connected to a nonprofit?
For us specifically, in the playwriting category, yes, because you can apply on your own. But in the apprenticeship and fellowship category, unfortunately not. You do have to be working with a nonprofit theater company.
Specifically in the Fox Fellowship Program, again, it is similarly structured where it's the artist working with a host organization. But we do have other programs, grant programs, and you can look at them online. One of them is our Global Connections Program, which is an international program. And individuals can apply in addition to organizations to, we've got 3 parts to the program. One is travel, one is R&D research, workshopping, and another is touring. And an individual could apply in the on the road and in the lab portions. So some of our programs are, it really depends. One of the things that I forgot to mention with the Fox program is the host theater organization that you work with or the applicant works with has to be a TCG member theater at the time of application. So it doesn't, it's absolutely fine. Our membership department is really great at like processing these things really quickly. But that is just one of the stipulations that our funder wanted us to ensure in the program. A little bit of a segue, but
That's good. I'm going to say that there are a few questions here about looking for, like, how do you find these fellowships and how do you find grants? And I'm happy to have you all answer it, but I also know that that's a separate panel in and of itself. So I know I'm happy to answer some of those questions after we're here, but if you guys have resources you think you would like to share, it'd be a good time.
I mean, there are a lot of organizations, too, out there that do, I'm sure you guys do here, like workshops and all, but also the field does workshops that are similar. Creative Capital, I mean.
For sure. Like I said, we at Fractured Atlas, you know, offer, through fiscal sponsorship, again, that's why I'm happy to talk about it again after, to talk about resources. Knife a Source is also a free resource to look for grants, look for opportunities. But I just wanted to make sure that I'm not ignoring those questions. It's just they are a bigger, slightly larger topic than where we are right now, but I am happy to answer those individually. Let's see.
It sounded like you said Knife a Source.
I did, sorry, Knife at New York Foundation for the Arts, Source.
Yeah.
Isn't that KNIFE?
No.
NYFA.
NYFA, I apologize. Yeah, nyfa.org/source. And it's a resource that way. There's the Foundation Center.
Fabulous, yeah.
There is...
Foundation Center can be a little bit of...
can be daunting.
Yeah, daunting, but they do, at least I think they still do this, that they have kind of tours and sessions periodically, so you can sign up for that and they can show you how to find what you need to find at the Foundation Center. It's not only in New York, too, they're also in other cities.
Yeah, and every October is National Arts Funding Month, and so they do specific resources for people looking to fund arts-based projects, because it can be, the Foundation Center is just huge and can be daunting, like I said. October, the month of October? Yeah, they tend to do arts-based funding things at that point. But there's an entire industry on searching for grants, so we definitely can't cover it at the end of this. I see we're actually making really good time. So are there any particular points that you ladies would like to make, either about kind of grant funding or fellowship funding in general, or specifically your programs that you feel we haven't covered?
I'd like actually just to see if there's anything that you all want to talk about that we haven't touched on yet. Not necessarily a question, but is there an area that you, or anything that we brought up that you want us to elaborate on that went by really quick?
Let's see.
We've got some hands, so do you want to?
Can we reach out to hands? I don't believe we can. because of the
Oh,
because of the union.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
believe we can.
Sorry.
People can't appear on camera.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for afterwards.
All right, only our special faces can show up, which is why a lot of these questions, I will say, a lot of the questions have come from members of the audience on the cards we've been working through. So I promise you that I've tried to keep.
Or write it down on a card.
Yeah, I've tried to keep my questions and the questions from the audience. I tried to keep a pretty good pace. Yeah, what is, I guess I will adjust my question to say, what is a kind of off-kilter piece of advice that you might help? And what I mean by that is something that you just would, if you could just pull somebody off the street and tell them one thing that they need to know about this application that isn't just about formatting or tone or whatever, but is like something that almost doesn't necessarily fit in another section of a frequently asked questions, what would that be? If you have something like that.
I mean, mine is more administrative, where we've talked a lot about, crafting your application to talk about the relationship and hitting the roles and responsibilities that you're going to be taking on during the grant period, but also paying attention to the administrative guidelines in terms of when an organization asks for specific margins or font size and criteria in that way, because we're asking for it because it helps our process move faster, and we don't want to have to come back to you to say, that was 5 pages and we only wanted 1. Can you redo it? So, it sounds a bit silly, but really paying attention to those administrative details, because there's a reason that we're asking for it, and it might not make the most sense to you as an artist, but it helps the panel run really smoothly and get the best results possible.
I guess it's that our job is giving away other people's money, right? And so we want to give away other people's money. We don't, at the end of our grant period, our relationship with our funders, we don't want to give any money back to them, right? We want to expend it all. And we want to give away the money because we know the field needs it. I mean, who doesn't need another $25,000, right? Who doesn't need, if you've got student loans, $10,000 of student loan repayment, which is one of the parts of our program and in one of our other grant programs. We're going to assume that everybody needs it. And so help us give you the money. Really, that's it, because we're only doing our job if we have all of those stories that we can tell, like the Aaron Davidman story about him becoming artistic director, or any number of stories. I kind of purposely didn't want to bring up things from this particular grant program, but we want those stories, and those can only happen if you do your part of the work, really.
That is, thank you, ladies, for being so forthcoming and so clear about this process and your organizations. I know I've learned a lot. I really appreciate you guys here. I appreciate you all for coming out and really having some very thoughtful and very helpful questions. I know that it really helped to make the experience more powerful for us all. So thank you very much, ladies. Thank you, guys.